Welcome to the Transportation Lien Forum. We have a little bit of housekeeping to do before we dive into our presentations this morning. If we could go to the next slide. My name is Patrick Cowley. I'm with the Utah Department of Transportation. Gary Vincent was kind enough to allow me to sit in and host today's webinar. Super excited. This is one of my favorite times of the years when we get to do the TLF. So much good information, and we'll get into that. But we are entering our second decade of the TLF. And so we just celebrated 10 years in our last forum, and we are very excited to be moving forward. Today's webinar is produced by the Colorado Department of Transportation, specifically Stephen Barela and Rebekah Roux, who were too modest to have their pictures shown on this slide, but you can see them. They've got their, Stephen's got his camera on, but they will be working behind the scenes to make sure that this runs smoothly. So we're very grateful for their efforts. They worked tirelessly to get everything set up for today. So let's go to the next slide. Just a reminder, this is going to be recorded, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to access those recordings a little bit later on. And this recording from today will be available in about 4 weeks. So be looking for that on in the future. As a reminder, there are specific times we'd like you to mute your microphone, and that's while the presenters are giving us all their good information. And if we could go to the next slide, there's times when we want you to unmute. We would love to hear from you when we open it up for questions, and especially with the open forum at the end. We love to have the dialogue. Having said that, we do have the chat function available where you can enter questions. And if you look in there, we're trying something a little bit new. This was Rebekah's idea, and we're going to see if it works out well. She has a Google Doc in there where you can go in and add a little bit more information, who you are, what question you have, and which presenters you'd like to ask that with. So if you can access that, fantastic. It looks like there's a number of you getting in there. So be thinking of those questions as we go along. If we have time after each presentation, we may ask a few questions, but the bulk will be at the end when we have the open forum. Moving on to the next slide. Those of you who are working through a VPN, experience in the past has led us to believe that the connection makes it much more difficult. So if you can turn off your VPN, you will be able to have a much better experience with the webinar. So getting into today's agenda, we are doing the intro right now, the welcome, and we have the Tennessee Department of Human Resources. Greg, Mary, and Rebekah have joined us today. We're very excited about that. And Vinny and Alan from the Arizona Government Transformation Office. Now that was really hard, I want you to know, because we're used to transportation offices. And so this transformation office is a little bit different for us. So you'll have to explain that to us. Then we'll be talking about a little bit of what's going to be going on moving forward with this second decade of TLF. Well, as always, we'll have an open forum, and then we will close that out. So the vision of the Transportation Lien Forum is really to provide this community of transportation professionals and agencies to share and support others in the lien and continuous improvement movement. And this has been so fantastic that we've been able to have not just transportation professionals come and share with us, but those that are really invested in continuous improvement and process improvement. They can come and share with us so that we can improve the transportation community. On this next slide, they asked me for a quote, and I looked up on my whiteboard And this is the one that stood out to me. James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, he says standardization before optimization. And what this means to me is I got to know what I have before I can make it better. And I'm so excited that our presenters today just so happen to have a similar theme to what I'm trying to accomplish as well. And so for me, if I can just standardize and simplify and then work on the improvements, I find that it's much more effective. Okay, next slide. This is where we show all the members or those who have subscribed to the newsletter and to come to the forum where they reside, as far away as Sweden, as far north as Alaska, and in Canada. What we would like for you to do right now is take a moment and in the chat, where are you tuning in from? And we would love to know and add that to our map for all the different states and provinces and countries that are benefiting from this forum today. So I see some from Tennessee and Texas and Michigan. And I don't know, maybe this will date me a little bit, but Miss Julie on Romper Room would have her magnifying glass and she would be looking and she sees Carol and Joe and we've got some Matt from Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Minnesota. Thank you so much. Keep those coming in. We're gonna note them down and add them to our map here. We really appreciate you being a part. Okay, next slide. Don't know how many of you are familiar with QR codes. I did a recruiting event a couple of years ago where we had a QR code and some of the students came by and they're like, I have no idea what to do with this. So this slide is for those people who have never seen a QR code before. You can pull out your camera, test it out. You should be able to use any modern day smartphone to be able to use this QR code to link directly to our Transportation Lien Forum website. And so we're going to pause here for just a moment, test that out, make sure that it works for you, because on the next page, we have the Lien interchange. This is a great resource that the Colorado Department of Transportation has put together. And you can see along the top there, they've got the toolkit, resources, and you can actually access the previous TLF recordings. If you have friends who want to join the TLF and get the newsletter, there's that option as well. So take a moment, do a screenshot, grab this, share it with all your friends so they can be with us the next time. And the May recording is already up, and so you can see what was there. As well, just as I'd mentioned, all the previous TLF newsletters are there. And if you didn't get this last one, there's so much good stuff, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of how many folks have contributed to it and the value that you can gain with your states and agencies from subscribing to the TLF newsletter, and even more importantly, contribute to share with others. So that QR code should get you, again, to this Lien interchange site. If there are any technology issues going on, you can contact Stephen or Rebekah. Their emails are there, or you can just direct message them in Zoom or put it in the chat. They will be monitoring that, and we will try to get that up and running and going. So as we are going to dive into these presentations, please feel free to use all that Zoom has to offer and give an applause. You can clap, you can do reactions, and help our presenters know that they're hitting the mark with what it is that you're dealing with, or that you appreciate what they have to share. So we would love to have you participate in that way as well. And without further ado, we will dive into our first presentation. We have the Tennessee Department of Human Resources, Greg, Mary, and Rebekah. I am just going to turn this over to you and allow you to present what you have.
Thanks, Patrick. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and just want to, kind of point out the obvious. You mentioned it a little bit, but why are people from the Tennessee Department of Human Resources presenting at the Transportation Lien Forum? And the reason for that is I was involved when Tennessee brought lien to state government back in 2011, and our efforts to begin and bring lien to the state of Tennessee and to Tennessee state government. We searched around all around the country for other practitioners of lien and happened to find Gary Vansuch when he began or started bringing people together for this transportation lien forum. And we've tried to stay involved ever since. We learned so much from this. When I got my current job with the Department of Human Resources back in 2019, one of the first things I did was point out to my team that we could learn a lot from this forum and others like it around the country. But it seems like the Transportation Lien Forum is the one that we tend to lean toward the most. We tend to make sure that we're all engaged whenever the Transportation Lien Forum is happening. And so we really use it a lot. But today, what we're talking about is the very first goal that my commissioner brought to me when I was hired on at the Department of Human Resources is he would like to have all our business processes documented. And you can see on the right-hand side of the screen there some of our process maps that we've done since I began in 2019 and since we got that charge in January of 2020. We've actually accomplished that task, and rather than me continue to talk, I'm going to turn it over to my team. I'm going to turn it over to Mary Allman as we switch to the next slide and let her tell you a little bit about how we got there.
Thanks, Greg. Like Greg just said, we were tasked with identifying and mapping all of our business processes within DOHR, which we have 13 different divisions within DOHR. So this was going to be a huge task and a big project to tackle. And so the first thing was we had, our regular job duties that we were currently doing. And so we had to figure out a way to make time for this new project. But among our regular duties, we were also completing any new initiatives or any external customer requests that we would get from other state agencies. And then last but not least, we always try to stay up to date with any training or any training opportunities that come along. We try to take advantage of that. Next slide. And so where did we begin? Well, Rebekah and I was new to Lien and the whole mapping process and everything. So Greg had to bring us up to speed on that and learn how to use Visio. So we kind of went through a quick training process before we started actually mapping and getting with the division. And so we started out by getting with the department heads to have a conversation and get a list from them of all the processes that they want to be mapped within their division. And so we would map in person with the subject matter experts, and we would use whiteboards all over the room, markers, and then of course we had a camera to take pictures of all of the work that we had done when we were completed with the mapping session, which we used those pictures later on to create an electronic map in Visio to be used later and keep those electronically filed. And so we did that until, as most of you remember, back in March of 2020 when the pandemic hit. This kind of changed the way that we had to do everything. So we were, from doing our mapping sessions in person, we had to figure out a way to go virtual. And so we tried all different tactics, and we wound up navigating a way to do virtual mapping directly into Visio. And we actually found that reduced waste. We, saved time by not having to create the maps on a whiteboard and then take a picture and then go into Visio later. Directly going into Visio made things actually a lot easier and better for everyone. And so with the new way of doing things, we had to come up with a plan to tackle this goal. The first thing we did was we tried to divide the work among all 3 team members. And then we established mapping standards. And by that, we created a template within Visio so that all of our maps could be started out with that template so that they would look, you know, similar and uniform, and have a standard way of doing the maps. We also kept in continuous communication with all of the department and division leaders. So they were always either invited to a mapping session, they were copied on all email communication, and then any report outs that we did from those mapping sessions were done with those division leaders. We also asked those leaders to set goals for each business process so that when we went into actually mapping that process, we could identify and look for areas that those leaders wanted us to look at and take a little deeper dive into. And then when it came to actually mapping, we mapped with the teams of the process owners. So whoever those division leaders felt were the subject matter experts, those were the people that we mapped with. And so we saw the light at the end of the tunnel earlier this year in spring of 2022. And we made the final push to complete all of the mapping. We saw that we were getting close to the end. And then by June of 2022, we actually finished. And it was a great 2.5 years, or 1.5 years, 2.5. But that doesn't mean that we're done just because we finished mapping all the business process, because things, you know, are still innovating and changing. And so there are other things that we have to go in and make changes to and update maps. But there are also new processes and new initiatives that come along that we'll continue to map in the future. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebekah, and she can talk about some of the things that we accomplished.
And if Rebekah is talking,
Rebekah, you're on mute.
I have, sorry, I have a
There you
double
go.
mute. I have my headset's not muted, but I was muted. So with everything that Mary just spoke about, asking what did this accomplish? An immediate benefit was that when our state IT department brought the potential to us that we could look into process automation, we were able to move forward with this immediately. And so why is this important? Automating workflows allows businesses in the private sector to grow profitability and increase their productivity. And in state government, we aren't looking at the profit, but rather, the ability to use the resources that we have in a manner that will allow us to serve more people and maximize the use of tax dollars. And by implementing the process automation, whether it's the full end-to-end process or even just part of one of our processes, we're able to reduce human error, remove mundane, time-consuming, repetitive tasks, and then also complete things at a much more rapid pace. To move into this exciting chapter for us at the Department of Human Resources, the first step was to actually fully understand the processes that we as an agency perform. Once this was accomplished by having it all on process maps, we could prioritize the processes that would be first to implement the automation. And then we also could seek to fill gaps in the documentation that we already had and areas that we could possibly improve upon. This allowed us to begin to identify duplication of functions like approvals, auditing. Some of our transactions were being 100% audited, and even processing certain transactions in 2 different places. As an agency, the Department of Human Resources is responsible for recruiting, professional development, and then retention of about 43,500 employees. So while control measures are essential to maximizing those efforts and then minimizing risks and financial losses, the addition of approvals and audits is not always the most effective method. What we found is while this will remain a work in progress throughout the next phases of our process improvement, we know that we will be reviewing in a more thorough manner all of these areas to ensure that we have clear criteria for each approval level and that the audit results are being synthesized to ensure that they are effective and appropriate. It also allowed everyone to see where we did not have clear criteria for approvals and understand why that's important. And this is one of those areas that definitely tends to evolve over time. I'm sure that if you imagine in your own world, of course, we work in Department of Human Resources, but approvals are still essential to what we do. So we have criteria to ensure that what we're approving, what we are not able to approve, and the reason for both. And then we look at possible trends in those. But the clear criteria minimizes the risk of having tunnel vision or even indecisiveness if you're faced with too many variables to make appropriate determinations. And when we see a trend in some of these things, it's particularly important because they can be a sign of a broken process, an unsteady work balance, and potentially indicate the need for further training and development, or even serve as an inspiration for more opportunities. If you don't take a step back every once in a while to look and see what each approver is looking at, you risk checking a box just because it's your turn. You risk creating bottlenecks where approvers may be unavailable. And you can even create rework if the approvals towards the end of the process are denied, like if you can imagine playing a game of chutes and ladders. So you get all the way to the top and then it gets denied and you have to start all over at the bottom. So this provided a way for us to forecast future business process improvement projects by analyzing needs and determining where our work can have the biggest impact. From our partnerships within each division of the Department of Human Resources, we have aligned ourselves as the front runners of special projects. By asking the right questions with the right participants, we're able to create curiosity, and we feel like we foster communication where it otherwise would not have occurred. For us, that's important because our division leadership now can come to us and say, this is something we would like to look into. And Mary and Greg and I can work those projects into our next layer of process improvement. And then this next part is by far my favorite. So if I look like a little kid in a candy shop, you'll know why. When a significant part of a process is housed in various places by multiple people. So if you can imagine if each one of you has an individual log sheet, an email, a paper trail, paper requests, and then eventually it goes into one workflow. There is no way to determine what our pipeline of work is. There are all sorts of potential pitfalls for this. Appropriate staffing is not guaranteed. We have inconsistencies in the development of transactions that can occur, and there's not a consistent method of weighing the variables. So essentially, there's no built-in accountability. What do we do if somebody wins the lottery and decides not to come back to work? Hoping that'll happen for me. But someone has to be there to pick up the pieces. So our process improvement projects allow everyone to see where we didn't have a common repository where notes and data were stored for works in progress. And that can cause inconsistent outcomes. It can lead to functioning on assumptions. And in our process improvement, we know that having that workflow into a common filter establishes a beginning to end. And this allows everyone involved to acknowledge, monitor, track, and assess the volume of work and the status of the work. This also allows our leadership to know at any given time how much work there is and how much there is to be completed and how that workload can appropriately be addressed. The other thing this accomplished is it created transparency and understanding of our frontline employees and the value that they bring to our work. And then it created awareness among department leadership of how we could help them address barriers pain points, and other issues with their work that could prevent them from accomplishing their goals, mission, vision, and values. Through these conversations that we held in the process mapping events that Mary talked about, the frontline employees could see the work. They can discuss the reasons that they do each step. We can talk about what would happen if that step was completed incorrectly, or what if we skipped it. And then the ideas that they may have been holding on to, thinking, if only we could do this. So pulling those ideas and inspirations from people who do the steps, they know the steps inside and out, fosters a culture of growth and change, and asking what we can do rather than what used to feel like we were kind of stuck at times in a culture of limitations or a culture of no. So ultimately, at the end of my part of this, I'll leave you with this. What we're experiencing now is a visible culture change within the department. People that we've worked with look at what they do differently now. Just one example of a benefit that we may all be able to relate to as employees, we can become accustomed to hearing about limited opportunities for pay increases. People talk about budget cuts, limitations of fundings, and things of that nature. But as an employee, if you see waste in a process and that waste is incorporated into your daily work and no one seems to be addressing it, it makes it harder to understand limited salary improvement opportunities. But with continuous improvement projects, what we've seen is our employees realize we're working to maximize our capacity to do more with what we have. And we actually see more opportunities for improvement evolving where they were once, we were just settling for how things were, which caused at times frustration. Sometimes that led to employee stress. And the best part about it is knowing that our team at the Department of Human Resources, if they start to feel those things, it's almost like a trigger, and they know that they have Greg, Mary, and I as a team to guide them, and they can come to us and we can start to work to figure it out. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our fearless leader, the Director of Business Process Improvement and Quality Assurance for the Tennessee Department of Human Resources, Greg Spradley.
Thanks, Rebekah and Mary. Appreciate you guys. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what's next. Now that we've mapped and documented all of our business processes within DOHR, how do we plan to use that? And what do we plan to do? Well, one of the things you probably heard, I'm going to use some cliches and things here along the way, but one thing we want to do is to be able to skate to where the puck is going and not where it's been. That was a quote from Wayne Gretzky years ago, and when somebody asked him how he got as good as he is and how does he score so many goals, he's always looking ahead. He's trying to see where things are going. So how do we go about that in our world, in business process improvement? First, we establish goals, and we establish those goals as a department. We establish goals as divisions and as process owners. And the reason we do this is because the goals face the future. This looks to what we want to accomplish, and it has us always looking for the next better thing that we can do to make the work that we do better for our customers. It also helps us to identify changes and developments that might impact our business processes along the way, and take a look at those things that, you know, may be outside of our agency, but they may have an impact. And we're talking about legislation, you know, new rules, changes in technology, and things like the pandemic. Those sorts of things. We try to look ahead and streamline our processes as much as possible before we begin doing anything new. And if we're going to implement a new information system, we want to make sure that we have the best process possible before we actually configure that new system and put it into use. And also, understanding our data helps us to understand trends and what's going on. And we have a very close relationship with our Office of OPDM, Office of Performance and Data Management. performance and data management, and we cooperate with them regularly within our business process work, looking at the data, trying to figure out what additional data we need to collect and what the data that we have right now tells us about our business processes. Next slide, please. So some new department goals that our leadership has set since we completed documenting our business processes. Number one, a big project is the hiring process itself. We would really like to standardize that across the 32 cabinet level agencies and the additional other government agencies and boards and commissions and so forth. So we're trying to make sure that everybody, even though they may have things that they have to do that are unique to their own departments, we want to standardize that hiring process and those transactions once it gets to DOHR so that everybody gets the same type of service and has the same processing time or knows what to expect with our processing time. Also, we have in our recruiting division, rapid hire events, which we've mapped, and now we're looking at standardizing those across the enterprise so that any agency, if they have a large need to hire a large number of people, they can come to us and we can give them a tool that we have done before, that they can understand what goes on within that event and can help them meet those larger needs when they come about. And another thing is we have our group that conducts conferences, events, and academies. They need some help with managing their projects for total success. And that's making sure that they get all their contracts necessary, developed and signed in time, and also their vendors that they have, making sure that they get everything lined up for those conferences and everything is done in a timely manner and meets all the rules and regulations with the state of Tennessee. And after these things have come up just in the last few weeks, I think we've had somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 additional process improvement projects that have come our way. Some are internal to our department and a couple are external to our department. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Next slide, please. Another thing we've done is to incorporate a regular business process status check into our annual QA reviews. Mary mentioned that one of our duties we have is annually we do a quality assurance review of every division in our department. And as part of that, we've incorporated that business process status check to help us ensure that we maintain the processes, that the documentation of those processes that we've already completed. Make sure that we identify any new opportunities to improve as we go along, and also ensure that we have any new processes documented as those processes are developed. Next slide. And also, like I mentioned earlier, we try to share the Kool-Aid with departments that are external to the Department of Human Resources. And we continue to assist those other state agencies with their business process improvement needs because we work with them all. And it really helps if those other agencies understand Lien and understand what we're looking at when we try to improve our processes and improve our service to them as our customers. And also, when those seeds that we plant in other places, when we plant those seeds in other places, they can grow while we're not around, and everybody, it just continues to build the culture and grow the culture of continuous improvement and process improvement. Next slide. And we not only work to help others improve, it's also essential that we try to improve as well. And that's something that we talk about on a weekly basis. First off, we survey our customers both before our QA reviews and after every business process improvement engagement to find out what we can do better to help them, what things did not work as well for them as they thought they should, and that sort of thing. So we're trying to always learn from our customers what we can do better. And like I say, we discussed at those weekly, we call them traffic meetings, that we have to plan and discuss what we've done, what everybody's doing for that week, and how can we do things better. We also have regular meetings with division and department leadership to talk about these things and talk about their needs and how we can help them maybe in other ways than what we've done in the past. So we use these interactions to continuously evaluate our own metrics, our key service indicators, and also to help us annually update our customer-focused government goals. Next slide. So in short, this little team, the three of us here, Mary, Rebekah, and myself, we drive the culture of our department. We drive that continuous improvement culture. And we have a head start on improving our processes now because they're all documented. So when we start a process improvement project, we start by analyzing existing processes, not mapping them or documenting them at the beginning of the process itself. Also, our team is familiar with everything our agency does now. The three of us have been involved in documenting every business process, so we understand who does what within our agency, and down to minute details, we understand what goes on within our agencies. And our agency staff have seen what we can accomplish when we work together. And that's that big culture change. They all seem to want to reach across silos now, where it used to be they would, pull in and keep their problems, as they say, within their own little silos, where now they try to reach across those silos in order to help solve those problems. And nearly everyone in our department sees our work from a new perspective and their own work from a completely different perspective now that we've got maps that they can look at and understand exactly what goes on within those processes, not only the tasks that the individual does, but all the tasks within that process and how they work together. And next slide, I believe that's the end of our little presentation. So we'd be happy to answer any questions if we have time. How do we do?
So we have time for maybe 2 questions, then we'll move on and then save the rest of the questions that we have written here for a little bit later. But these are pretty quick fire ones. Michelle Malloy asked, how many processes in total did you map in their current state? Oh,
wow. Goodness gracious. I have not added up the total number, but it's got to be it's close to 200. And that's kind of a guess based on the number of file folders that we have and the number of maps that we have in those file folders. It would be close to 200 business processes.
Yeah, I'd say with the processes and the sub processes, it's at least that. That was kind of the number that I had.
Along with that, having 200 or plus, given the sub processes, how do you get people to look at them and to make sure they're up to date? And if a practice changes, you've taken the time to map it. Now, as soon as I find that I put something together, it's out of date, right? That somebody changed something, that a new law came along or whatever. How do you make sure that they're continually being updated?
Well, a part of it is just the culture. Now that people have seen us come through and map those processes, when they have changes, we have a lot of people that we've worked with will come to us and say, hey, we've done something different. We've had to change something within our process. So that's one piece of it, is just the culture changes brought that about. But also that regular checkup with our annual QA reviews, that gives us a standard automatic. We always check with them on their business processes and say, has anything changed since we last talked to you about things? So it's built into our processes daily or annually.
And I hope that you have that process documented.
Yes.
I would also add that our executive leadership team really is on board and drives what we do. So it's almost built into the expectations from the top down, and then from the bottom up. I mean, we all understand that this is just kind of built into what we do.
Now, that's an excellent point. The fact that our upper leadership, the commissioner and the executive leadership team, have really pushed this, gets buy-in from everybody. So that's been really helpful.
Marcia Tope has, and I apologize if I'm slaughtering anybody's names. She asked, how did you identify all the processes that would have to be mapped prior to going into an area? How did you get them to fess up with what they were doing and what they wanted you to come in and help with?
I don't think that we really had to convince anybody. Again, once the commissioner came in and said, we're going to document all our business processes, when we would go into a particular division and begin with them, we would ask them, you know, where's your highest priority? Where's your biggest heartburn or your biggest barriers? And we would usually start with those. And we always start out a mapping engagement with a goal. We have leadership of that area decide on a goal that they want to accomplish through that mapping process. And once we began to map with them, they started seeing the utility of it, and they would just line up their processes one right after another at that point, and they were ready to go. Once they saw what we could do.
I would add to that too, that if you have somebody that's reluctant or says, I don't have any processes to map, it starts people kind of scratching their heads going, well, what do you do? If you don't have anything to bring to the table, then, how do you spend your day? And so you can even back up to just some basic questions. And then all of a sudden the processes come out. And usually those are the ones that I find more benefit once we get it on paper. Once we can put out there what it is they do, it almost helps them solve some of their own problems. So
go ahead, Mary.
Oh, I was just going to add, some people don't look at what they do as really being a process, like, oh, I push a button all day. It's not really a process to that. Well, if you think about it, yeah, there is. There's a process to everything that we do. And so, we just had to put that mindset of, everything has a process. So really think about exactly what everybody in your division is doing, and let's bring out what those processes are. And that's how we came out with our lists of everything we needed to do.
That was the point I was going to make. When we talk to a lot of people, they don't think process, right? They think coming to work and doing my work. You had talked a little bit about performance metrics and how you can show the workload and the progress. Another thing that we found successful is you say, well, what do you produce? What's the outcome that you want? And then you can work backward from there. Have you found that is a big part of your conversations as well? Is what is the output that you're looking for, or the outcome?
Yes, definitely. One of the first things that we did whenever we were mapping something was we would start with basic information about the process, like what's your volume, what's your demand, what do we have to do every day. And I apologize, I'm kind of losing track of what the actual question was, but when you start looking at the data that's available and just regular management data, it becomes kind of second nature to start looking for other places to collect data to see where performance can be impacted in small pieces of a process, and to figure out new ways to look at how we're measuring things along the way.
The last item I want to share before we move on, we still have a number of questions we'll be asking a little bit later, but Rod McDaniels, just to your point, Rebekah, how you talked about market economics are completely different between public and private sectors. We're working with a consultant on risk, and he's getting a deep dive into what we think is risky within the department, and his eyes were opened so wide. He's like, we are 100% bottom line. You guys are worried about stuff we don't even think about, right? And so your analysis or your phrase of talking about public and private interests in the sectors, it does make a huge difference if you're trying to apply these principles.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a fundamental difference. And a lot of times with consultants, you have to bring them up to speed on that before they can really get work done.
Right. So thank you very much. We will engage you a little bit later. Right now, we are going to move on to our next presentation with Vinny and Alan from Arizona Government Transformation Office. We are just going to dive right in. And again, we do have the questions, so feel free to add those to the chat or to the doc here, And I will turn the time over to you, Vinny and Alan.
Well, good morning. Thanks for having us. So I'm Vinny LaBella, and Alan will be coming in a few slides and talk about some of the slides he wanted to speak to. Before I move on, a couple of things came up early on in this event today. Patrick says we usually have DOT or transportation type organizations. What the hell is GTO? So I'm going to give a brief overview, and then Alan's later going to give some history. And in the chat, a couple of folks noted I was from Boston and hope to have a Boston accent. And I think I deliver on that, even though I've been in Arizona for 19 years. But so we're excited to be here today, and talk a little bit about how at Arizona we've tried to transform the culture across state government. A little bit about GTO. It was established in 2012, was created to support the continuous improvement culture across Arizona. We currently have a team of 10, primarily Lien consultants. We have a data analyst. We have a comms person who just joined, like me. I'm just 5-6 weeks with GTO. I spent 10 years with ADOT. We're focused on 3 things at a high level right now: continuing to support the continuous improvement culture through training and events, et cetera. Assisting with the governor's office with high-level projects that may come across. And right now the team is working on some veteran services issues, some housing issues, things like that come up. And establishing the need and helping with data and data-driven decision-making. So at a high end, that's what we focus on right now. And there are over 30,000 employees part of this transformation. And we're going to talk a little bit about the system approach we took to this transformation, and hopefully some good lessons and examples for you guys today. With that, next slide, please. So,
Arizona state employees have chosen to serve our fellow citizens in their pursuit of a better life.
You can cue up the video, I'm sorry.
We are diligent and generous.
We lost you there for a minute, Vinny. Did you want us to cue up the video or move on to the next slide?
Was the video playing well, or was it just?
It was.
On my end, I couldn't hear it well.
Yeah, you're coming in and out a little bit. You're skipping. It was playing pretty well.
So we could play it for everyone else's benefit, and then I can talk about this slide.
Okay.
Thank you.
Arizona state employees have chosen to serve our fellow citizens in their pursuit of a better life. We are diligent and generous and recognized nationwide as role models
for innovation and continuous improvement.
We demonstrate through measurable results that Arizona is the best state in the nation.
Nearly 7 million Arizonans and countless visitors value an efficient and responsive state government,
delivering the opportunity for a better life in a rich, vibrant, and clean environment.
Our strong, innovative economy is powered by healthy citizens living in safe communities,
with every student receiving a world-class 21st century education.
Arizona operates at the speed of business.
We embrace a results-driven management system to transform the way our state government operates.
And we reflect daily on how we can do better.
As we look to the road ahead,
we can and will do more good for the people of Arizona
by improving our performance each and every day.
And we're ready to go, Vinny.
Sorry about that. So hopefully most of you could hear the bulk of what was said in that video as an overview. So that video was launched to help people understand across ADOT what the vision was, and then making this big idea real, right? So this statement was the laid the foundation for AMS, Arizona Management System. So I'm just going to read it. Arizona's management system is an intentional process and results-driven approach for doing the work of the state, empowering every employee at every level to reflect daily on how they did and decide how to do better going forward with sustainable progress. So I don't know how many of you have a Lien management system. You could put it in the chat if you'd like, but we're going to talk a little bit about the key elements of the Arizona management system. And as we go forward, so there's 36 cabinet agencies, lots of smaller agencies in the state of Arizona's government, some big, some mid-sized, some smaller. So we have a lot of shared things in common, and that's what I'm going to talk about. But different organizations and agencies took some slightly different approaches. But we're going to talk about the commonalities, and then Alan's going to speak, and I'm going to talk a little bit about ADOT at the DOT in Arizona specifically. So next slide, please. So this Venn diagram of sorts talks about the Arizona management system culture and the key elements. So there's three big elements, as you can see, and then sub-elements. Leader behaviors, problem solving, and performance management are the three core elements. And each of these elements is supported by tools to help leaders and team members identify problems, develop strategies to resolve them, and conduct themselves in a continuous improvement environment. So everyone links back to this. While there may be some different structures, these are core areas that we all focus on. Next slide, please. Something else that we have in common since the outset, so 2016, consistently across the enterprise, that we have an AMS assessment. And so we have lots of things we could have shown, but basically these are the 11 elements that all the agencies are asked to score themselves on and then reflect upon. So this is another consistency. So no matter which approach we're taking within using the three core elements, how well we're doing, right? So, and it's a score of 1 to 5 basically on these elements. For instance, we'll take element number 4, leader-centered work. We would ask ourselves, what's your level of awareness and understanding of this element? And it's described. And then each team, generally, some managers would do it, but at a team level, decide how well you're doing and then draft plans for improvement. So this is a consistent measure that we've had for 6 to 7 years, no matter which approach was taken. Next slide, please. And then focusing on the leader behaviors, so the leaders, and also keeping in mind that everyone's a leader, but we also set out these specific roles and responsibilities, hence obligations at the senior level leader, manager level, and frontline leader. So this set of roles and behaviors is communicated and shared throughout training documents, communication pieces, et cetera, and it's really foundational. So no matter which approach you've taken, do you have your own OCI office, center of excellence? Are you relying on GTO? Are you relying on champions? These roles and behaviors and the three core elements are consistent across the enterprise. That said, I want to turn it over to Alan, and he's going to take you through some details of how this all really works. Alan?
Okay, thank you, Vinny. Good morning, everyone. Before I start talking about the AMS annual cycle, which you see up here, which is the strategic planning cycle, I'll give you a little bit more background on the government transformation office here at the state of Arizona. So it was established back in 2012, and it was a small office at that time. It was created to start developing continuous improvement, lean culture. It really started to expand out into, it was narrowly focused to some of the agencies, but it really started to expand out in 2015, where they had what they called the Permit Blitz. And what this was a series of projects trying to improve service delivery on permits. So any agencies that might provide permits were asked to submit projects around these permits. And the one goal around those permits was that you would have at least a 50% improvement of whatever that improvement might be. It would improve by 50%. So it was really focused on these projects, and there were a number of agencies that participated in this. What they found was that when they got through this permit blitz, as an average, they actually realized about 67% improvement. And most of the improvements can be tied into the service delivery time of permits, but it was very successful. So we started to expand out a little bit more with that. During the permit blitz, we also did train the trainer sessions. We had volunteers from the agencies who would help lead these permit blitz projects. And then we supported that. The transformation office supported these teams and teaching continuous improvement through these projects. We then looked at making more of a presence and really trying to change the culture. So initially, when we expanded, we looked at supporting 17 of the larger agencies, and that represented about 75% of the state employees. And those 17 agencies received about 50% of the general fund. So we quickly expanded outside of these 17 larger agencies into all agencies and smaller agencies. So agencies could take a number of approaches in building their culture. Some agencies used consultants, outside consultants. A number of the larger agencies that had a budget established their own offices of continuous improvement. Some agencies utilized the GTO Lien consultants, and we worked back at that time mostly with the small agencies as far as really helping them develop the culture, because the larger agencies established these offices, or they appointed Lien, not consultants, but champions to really move things forward. So we might send one of our Lien consultants out into a smaller agency to work there for a few months at a time to get their foundation built. We also did a fellowship program where we would bring in people from other agencies, and they would work alongside of one of our GTO Lien consultants for approximately a year, and then they would go back into the agency and help develop the continuous improvement culture there. So that gives you a little bit of a background. I'm going to focus now our attention on what you're seeing on your screen. And the strategic planning deployment is a piece of the Arizona management system. And that's what we're looking at right here. You know, when you saw in that video that they were talking about making Arizona the best place to visit, to recreate, to retire, to do business, for education and so on. And really those were, that was the vision and the mission set by the governor's office. And as part of our management system, we asked agencies to start aligning strategically with those initiatives. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner, we start out with the strategic planning process. This is something that GTO at one time did with our agencies. Now we have an Office of Strategic Planning and Budget, and they work with each of our larger agencies, cabinet agencies, in order to develop these strategic plans. And these strategic plans, as I said, align with the governor's office initiatives, but they also align with strategically with initiatives that the individual agencies are working on. As part of the strategic plan too, we've asked the cabinet agencies to identify what we call a breakthrough project. And a breakthrough project is an improvement project. And what makes it significant is it is a more complex project, and it's going to be a project that is going to impact the performance in either an area of service, quality, people, and or cost. So all strategic plans have this breakthrough project. If you look in the upper right-hand corner where it says agency strategy deployment, these are the strategic initiatives, and they're deployed through project and improvement plans. For the breakthrough projects, we use A3s, and they also have driver metrics to ensure that these projects are moving forward. In the lower right-hand corner, on a daily, weekly basis, agencies monitor the process on or the progress on these initiatives through project metrics. So if we have an improvement project, not only do we want them to do problem solving and move that forward, but once they have implemented an improvement, we want them to be able to measure that improvement. So those metrics are captured on a scorecard, which I'll show you here in just a minute. And they also may show up on huddle boards within different groups and departments within an agency. In the lower left-hand corner, another key piece of this is that the agencies have monthly business review meetings. So at these business review meetings, the leadership team will review the scorecard metrics, and they'll get a report out on how things are performing. They may review the project A3s and also, discuss the strategic initiatives. If one of the metrics isn't performing as desired, then oftentimes a agency will come up with a countermeasure plan in order to get it performing where it needs to be. And that'll also be something that is discussed at those meetings. I think you can move forward now with the next slide. And yeah, so what you're looking at here is the scorecard. So all agencies, all cabinet agencies have the scorecard. It is in a web-based platform or application called QuickBase. And this is where the agencies track those strategic metrics most of them are on a monthly basis. The Governor's Office and the Office of Strategic Planning and Budget, as well as us, have access to all these reports for each of the agencies. The agencies also upload their A3 plans for their breakthrough projects here. And if their breakthrough projects are not going as planned and they need to implement countermeasures, they also will upload a countermeasure plan here. So we have a lot of visibility into how the agencies are performing. You can see from the example here, we have a lot of green. There's some yellow and red, and we use a green, yellow, red system here at the state to indicate how we are doing. So if a metric isn't performing as desired and it shows up in red, that's when we would expect to see a countermeasure plan put in place. Typically, it's not for all the metrics, but typically we say if you have 1 month in red, you need a countermeasure plan. Or if you have 2 months in yellow, which means it's at risk, then you need a countermeasure plan. So we really encourage transparency and encourage our agencies to embrace the red and keep it transparent so you can take action on it. Next slide, please. So as Vinny had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the focus for GTO is really to support this continuous improvement culture, and we also do projects and initiatives for the Governor's Office and support we're actually supporting like the building of dashboards with agencies, data gathering, and making data-driven decisions. So we've also looked at how can we change our approach. We're in a year where we're going to have an election, excuse me, and a new administration coming into office. And as our culture, continuous improvement culture, has matured, we looked at new approaches on how we can better support agencies of all sizes and no matter at what maturity level they are at. So we were taking a new approach in how we're interacting with the agencies and trying to interact more on what I'll say a daily basis with our agencies. And we'll still be doing the deeper lean work with our agencies, but we're also now starting to offer some standalone continuous improvement events. So you're not seeing it here, but we have, we just kicked this off about a month or so ago. We have a calendar of events, and these events are open to all state employees. We have right now about 1 to 3 events per week. And what we do is we offer training on our AMS elements that Vinny had covered a little bit earlier, and training events on continuous improvement, change management. We're doing workshops. We're looking at maybe doing like a book club. And we also just do presentations and also invite external presenters to those meetings. This, what you're looking at here, is something that we're really excited about. We're launching a new website called results.az.gov, and it's in development right now. So these are just a few screenshots, but the website is a public-facing website, and it will host information on the Arizona management system, but it'll also highlight the performance of our initiatives and our improvements. We'll also share our success stories. And there's also a few other elements to this website, and we hope to have this launched sometime in August. I think you can move forward from there. This is also something else that we just launched recently, actually in this month, July, and that is what we're calling our Gtl Newsletter. And anyone that has attended one of our GTO events will get added to this newsletter. And this will be a monthly sharing of information, again, on strategic planning. We'll share successes, also continuous improvement information, and also announcements and other upcoming events. Next slide, please. And we've also taken an expanded role with this administration change coming up, where we are working with our agencies to prepare for the new administration coming in. So we're assisting our agencies to be able to provide information to the incoming administration so that we can have a seamless continuation of the critical work that we're doing here at the state of Arizona. So we're asking agencies to provide, any relevant documentation that will be new, that will be important for the new administration to have. But we've also put together an agency summary template that we've asked the agencies to fill out to provide details of these items that you see listed on the right-hand side. More information on their strategy and performance, their budget, their organizational structure, and also what their accomplishments have been, projects that are in the works right now, and so on. So these are just a few of the major things that we're working on right now in changing our approach and expanding how we support the state of Arizona and utilize the management system. So agencies also have their own approach to their continuous improvement journey. And so I'll turn it over to Vinny, and Vinny is going to talk a little bit about ADOT's approach.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, so hopefully this makes sense. We wanted to give you a high-level overview of the state enterprise and some key elements, common elements. But being that this is a transportation focused group, I want to talk about ADOT's approach to work. And Kismet was on the call, and David from ADOT, so they can keep me honest. But this image here was, I think, it's going on 2 years now, at least a year and a half. It's an image to really showcase ADOT's approach to work. It's ADOT, AKA the ADOT way. AKA is the air, the values in the blue diagram part of it, the K from Kaizen, and the AMS A from the green. And just hopefully you can see right away some familiar, some connection to the Venn diagram and the three elements. If you look at the green section here, AMS, it's focused on performance management, leader behaviors, and problem solving. Right, that goes right back to the key elements, core elements of AMS across the state. Many agencies, many state themselves have their own values. So accountability, integrity, respect are ADOT's values. So their approach to work is to remember, keep alignment with their values, the three core elements of AMS, and this particular focus on Kaizen and three principles of Kaizen, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide, which is process and results thinking, total systems thinking, no judgment, no blame. Right, and the safely home is their mission, right, to get everybody home. So this chart encapsulates in an image their focus and the way they approach work at every level across the enterprise. And it's two pillars of Lien that they also lean on: a respect for people and this daily continuous improvement of Kaizen. And they've done a lot of work talking about defining it as a human-based approach to work over the past couple of years. Next slide, please. So the K in the middle, the AKA, is this Kaizen, and these are the three principles. So at ADOT, they focus a lot on this philosophy or mindset, as spoken here, and it's also the 7 practices that support this as well. I won't go knee deep into it, but in the training process at ADOT, Kaizen practices and principles is the recommended first training workshop or document or concept to learn, because at ADOT they feel very strongly that the tools follow the mindset. So that's the K and AKA. Next slide, please. So ADOT is trying to cultivate a culture where everyone, every day, everywhere is solving problems. And again, I left just in June. So it's a lot of history there, and it's still current in my mind. And they would say, like us all, we have a lot of work to do, right? Continuous improvement's a journey, not a destination. But they're seeing lots of results, and I'm going to show a couple of videos, and hopefully they play well. But before getting to the videos that showcase how this everyone, every day, everywhere problem solving has permeated, especially in the transportation part of the agency, which is half the agency. So the other half is support groups and things like MBD or DMV for a lot of folks. But some current things in the past year and evolving into this year that ADOT is still working on on this journey. Last year we focused on process mapping, and that's continuing. They focused on process mapping, like Tennessee talked about. They mapped over 500 units, did some mapping and standardizing of their work. They're working on tiered huddle improvements. So tiered huddles have been a part of ADOT's practice for 7 years, but they're focusing on the behaviors and, again, proving the behaviors and escalation specifically. They've done some recent recognition program enhancements, focus on recognition, right? And they think a lot about and talk a lot about the link between employee engagement and continuous improvement. Again, this focus on leader behaviors, a lot of work on remote work and transforming the facility and the plant, so to speak, to accommodate the remote workforce with hoteling, et cetera. Improvements to they do a yearly, across the state of Arizona, there's a yearly twice a year, and maybe have plans to do more, so they want more checkpoints on that. And they've done great work with the Ams Assessment that we shared earlier. And also using Google to create a lot of dashboards and metric visibility. So they also believe strongly there's a standardized onboarding program with AMS focus and integration. They train at all levels. There's training for the front line, there's training for managers, there's training for the seniors. And they have one-on-one coaching embedded throughout the agency. So all of that has come up with, created some great results. So I'm going to show some examples where frontline workers improve their processes to achieve better results. Not the leaders. The ideas came from the people on the ground doing the work, the SMEs, as I would say. So next slide, please. And hopefully this video plays clearly for you. And if there's an interest of time or others, we have a second video. But I think this one really shows what I'm trying to talk about here. Thanks, Patrick.
These are crash barrels. They're used to slow down the impact of an accident. Typically, it takes shovels and a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of labor. It's a lot on your back, depending on how many barrels we're filling. With a full crew, it can take close to a full day, a full 8-hour workday. We were discussing it in one of our morning meetings, and some of the crew says, is there a better way? And we thought about a funnel. I said, this might be a great time for a Kaizen. Looked at the materials that we had. So we built the prototype, we put it all together, the team. We went and used it the very next day. It went as smooth as we imagined it. We decided to reach out to equipment services that are weld shop, and in fact, we improved it a little more. On average, filling a sand barrel would take up to 3 crew members to fill that barrel, roughly 20 minutes. New funnel, it takes 2 minutes. Now that's about a 90% reduction in time. Now I can get multiple jobs done in one day and not just crash barrels for that one day. Now I can have fence repaired, I can have guardrail repaired, I can have potholes repaired. Oh, I would love to see every yard that has a crash barrel have one. It's proven that it's safer, faster, easier. The crew loves it. So it's well worth it.
So thank you. I know we're up against this. Was a good video that shows the people at the maintenance yards doing this work and then spreading it across the many districts. ADOT's a large state geographically. So with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick, and me and Alan will answer any questions if there's time.
Thank you, Vinny and Alan. We do have just a few minutes for questions until we have to move on. 2 different sides there. We've got the overall state agency going on, and then a department who is implementing that vision. Have you found in your new role within the last 6 weeks that you've been doing this, and Alan, the time that you've been doing this, that getting those departments, right, they're going to have their own cultures and they're going to have ways of doing things to help align them to the AMS? Has that been difficult, or has that been kind of a revelation where they can all learn from one another on trying and doing and perfecting it for their mode of business?
So Alan, I'll give you the floor because I don't have enough experience directly to speak to that. So Alan?
Okay, sure. So with the approach that we had taken, I had mentioned before, some of the agencies worked with outside consultants and some utilized GTO. They created their own offices of continuous improvement. As the transformation office, we provide training around the 3 core categories: performance management, problem solving, and leadership. And we provide examples. Agencies have a lot of flexibility on how they want to deploy, implement, and build that continuous improvement environment. We have the Ams assessment where we say, okay, these are those key areas that we want you to rate yourself on how you're doing. And it could be in standard work, it could be in building a tiered huddle system. So we provide a framework but there's a lot of freedom within fences. And so agencies have their own unique environments, and we realize that. So we try to provide them tools, examples, training, but ultimately it's up to them as far as if they want to use those tools, how they want to apply the continuous improvement methodology. And so we just provide them a framework.
Hey, thank you very much. We are going to move on, but be prepared. We will have a few more questions coming up in our open forum. But first, I wanted to talk about the Tlf Newsletter. And those of you who have signed up for it should have received it yesterday. We are grateful for all the contributors. We had contributions from California, Vermont, Illinois, Arizona, Colorado, and even one from FHWA in there. We would encourage you to continue to just share what you have and learn from others with the Tlf Newsletter. And one more place where you can find these videos is on YouTube. There is a Transportation Lien Forum channel site. And thank you so much to the Colorado DOT interns who have put this together, that you can go YouTube and watch these. And I've actually shared these with some of my cohorts here at Utah DOT, and you can get down to the actual minute where you want them to start and say, hey, watch this. It's really fantastic. I would encourage you to go to the YouTube site to share that. So this is the Transportation Lien Forum, and so we are going to launch right into the open forum. We have a few extra questions here written, but we would love to hear from those of you on the call if you would like to unmute and ask a question to Alan or Vinny or Mary, Greg, and Rebekah. They're all standing by and happy to do so. We also have some questions written if nobody steps up right away. So I'm going to be quiet for 30 seconds and allow you to just go ahead and pipe in. "30 seconds is a really long time to have a lot of people sitting and waiting. So having no takers right at the moment, we do have a few questions. This one is specifically for Rebekah. You talked about processes being automated. Was this automation done through specific software, or is the automation that you're talking about, was it more just people are in a habit of doing the work? How does that automation work?
I probably should let Greg answer that question, but it's not that people are automating their own work. It's a contracted effort, but it's a statewide effort, and we were just involved in the initial phase of it, and then we continued to be involved because in order to automate a process, you have to know what the process is to begin with. So they were reliant upon the work that we had done to get the automation process off the ground.
And I'll just add to that, this the effort was begun by STS, Strategic Technology Solutions, which is our enterprise-wide information systems group, and they had an opportunity with a contractor they were working with to automate some processes, and the fact that we had our processes already documented moved us to the top of the list. So we're one of the first two agencies that they're working with to provide, they're using something called robotics automation to actually automate particular steps within a process and it can actually automate steps that go from one system to another, so it can work with multiple systems at a time. It's really a neat a very neat thing going on, and we're getting, looks like we're going to have some real big processing time savings with that project.
That is fantastic. Now, along that same line, with all of these Visio documents and process documents that you're putting together, Michelle Malloy asks, what did you store in the common repository, and was that standardized?
We converted all the maps from Visio to PDF, and that's what we stored is the PDF versions of those maps. And when we say that we're storing the maps, it's not just the maps. We often put work aids and process documents into the files as well. So when you open a map, it'll have a map of the process, and then subsequent pages will be any documents or forms or anything that go along with that process as well. And they're all in PDF form on a shared drive.
So this is a question for both groups, and you can rock, paper, scissors on which one you want to have answer this. But from Tennessee and from Arizona, there was a question that came in, and I think this is one that is pervasive, is status quo. How do you overcome the mindset of why fix it if it ain't broke? And I think of Vinny's improve button right behind him, right as I say that. So well, I'll let you answer. Go ahead.
I could take a shot at it. I think this is a common problem, and if any of us had it completely figured out, we would share it and be very successful and make a lot of friends. But I think right away of changing paradigms. I know at ADOT specifically and across the enterprise, we talk about mindsets, right? So if people have paradigms about what lean really means, and I think I feel losing me, I apologize. But you talk about mindset, and the other thing is focus on key core principles, which is focus on a customer, right? So we want them to think about, is it working for the customer, right? That's what's the heart of this. So maybe working for you, that I always was trained and talked to ask, who are your customers? What do they need and require? How are you doing to deliver it? So if I keep going back to basics, right? Sometimes you can change people's minds. Oh, it worked for me, but not for the customer. I didn't know about that. I didn't think about that. How do we know what the customer needs? But it starts a different kind of process and perspective.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to weigh in?
I'll just echo what Vinny said, and also say that, as we get more and more people involved in our BPI work, and they see what can be done, sometimes they don't even realize how frustrated they were with a particular piece of their process. And when they see other people solving problems, they think, wow, maybe I could solve this thing that has plagued me for however long I've been doing this job. And so we get a lot of that as well. They don't even realize how bad it was until they figure out they can fix it.
Right. You talked about, and this is for Tennessee Department of Human Resources, the question came in, where do you post these processes for others to access for review? And do you have an internal website where it's just present, or do they dive into the folders and have to dig them out?
They're on for us. Our maps are again posted on a shared drive. It's a network drive. We call it the iDrive, and there's anybody in our agency can access that. We don't have any place right now where we have the maps stored where people outside of our agency can get to, but we can share those if requested. But it's just a shared drive right now.
Okay. There was a theme today that came out for me, and that was about transparency, right? We are bringing a lot of people's processes into the light, which now people know what I do, and I can be held accountable. And with Vincent and Alan, we had a lot of these results. We had our friend from Washington State, I was just reading that, Mustafa from Washington State has a results.wa.gov where they're posting their results. You have all these forms that are saying, hey, how well are you doing? Your Gemba walks, and everybody can look in. What role has transparency played, and has that made people more willing to share, or is that something you have to overcome? And I'll just open that up to anyone who's presenting.
Yeah, I can say a few words on that. I think, initially when we've worked with agencies, and I was also embedded in a couple agencies, or I worked in a couple agencies as a continuous improvement coach. It's creating that atmosphere where it's a safe environment for people to surface things. And it is something that we found that depending on the group and even the agency, it's going to be at, maybe they're going to be more guarded or less guarded. So it's really laying that foundation that you can have a safe environment, and employees know that they won't be reprimanded, retaliated against for identifying problems. And so we have encouraged agencies to use what we call a problem register, where employees can log problems that they see and also provide ideas to bring full transparency. And as we start making these improvements, and they might be small improvements to begin with, and as employees see that, hey, things are actually getting better, I'm not getting in trouble for, pointing something out, or saying, hey, we have an issue here, and we have those metrics to support that. The idea is that we want to show where we aren't performing well, and then empower our employees in order to improve those things, so we are performing, at an optimal level. So it's really creating the safe environment, and really it's just through giving them the opportunity to identify those problems and see that it's safe, and actually it's encouraged, and we celebrate when we see that people are surfacing problems.
I would add to that one of the things that we try to do is ask why and not who. So for example, where we have a dashboard similar to the one that was shown, and we can see the metrics, and if they're if a division's meeting their metrics or not. We can look at two different things from that. If they're not meeting their metrics, of course, we want to address why are they not meeting their metrics, not who's not meeting their metrics, but what is the problem that's causing this to not be green. Equally, if we have a division that's continuously, achieving 100% month after month, year after year, it makes you wonder: are we measuring the right thing? Because that indicates absolute perfection, and maybe we need to adjust what we're looking at or why. And just throwing out suggestions that sometimes lead to kind of altering what we're looking at and why we're looking at it.
I can piggyback on what Rebekah said, because that's an excellent point. We always train to focus on the process and not the people, or not the person. And so that's really where all of our continuous improvement comes into play, is really focusing on what's going on with that process. Where's the waste? How can we improve that? And not focusing on the people doing the work, but empowering them.
Mustafa from Washington State DOT added in the comments, transparency is very infectious. It's like letting the genie out of the bottle. Citizens and internal staff expectations are elevated, and eventually it becomes part of the culture. Have you noticed that it's become part of your culture now through your efforts?
I'll say absolutely. In our case, absolutely. It's become a lot more of our culture, and that really started when we started reporting out to leadership and department leadership, and the process owners would be in those report outs, And when leadership sees that not only have we identified the issues with that process, but we've also developed a countermeasure and a plan to address that issue with the process. It's a lot different than going to them with a problem without a solution. And so having those solutions by the time we report out is really helpful.
I was noting specifically with the Arizona management system, how they had leader behaviors, the assessment, how it was very structured and leaders knew how to act. One of the questions that came to my mind was, when you have all of these dashboards, who holds accountable specifically for like the weekly and monthly strategy execution? How do they get held accountable if their boards are turning red, or if slipping from green to yellow? Who is it that is responsible to make sure that, hey, we're talking about this and we need to address some of the processes failing or people not getting to those Gemba walks or whatever that is? How does accountability work?
I think that's going to vary by agency. But as just a high level, at that level, the weekly and the daily is really what we would maybe sometimes refer to as like where the frontline employees are, the people that are doing the work. And so if those metrics, lead metrics, whatever they may be, are in the red, it's really, we encourage teams to keep themselves accountable, and also the supervisors, managers of those teams to, if something is in the red, to address it, come up with countermeasure plans. So it's really at that daily, weekly level, it's that frontline team.
And I have,
sorry, I was having trouble finding the unmute button, but I just wanted to address, in our department, we have a monthly meeting where we go over our KSIs with leadership. Department leadership goes over our key service indicators every month, and we talk about, what we know about why we're not meeting those things and what we're doing about it. So every month we're having to look at those metrics and not only look at them, but also present and speak to the rest of leadership about what we're doing in order to try to address those things.
Thank you. I'm going to pause for just a moment to see if any other questions have come up. We don't have any more in the chat. I'm looking at the page here. Anyone want to weigh in from the audience? Well, I have one last question. Before we even started the presentation, we talked a little bit about change management and how you at Tennessee Department of Human Resources may be looking into change management. The one word that I found when I went through my change management training was resistance, right? So that's my question for this group. This last question of the day is, how do you address resistance, and how do you feel that change management would help you in your jobs getting people to change?
From our experience, the resistance seems to have melted away. The more we are able to guide people to solving their own problems and help them address those problems, resistance melts away more and more. And I think that's really happened as far as the culture in our department anyway, has really, gone in that direction of, we're here to make things better, and so resistance is not a thing that we have to worry about anymore. When we first started, it was, but I just think the more problems that we helped people solve, the less we encountered resistance.
Empowering them to where that change isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Exactly.
Gotcha. There was I had talked a little bit about those metrics being red, green, and yellow. And Michelle brings up a very good point that yellow and red aren't necessarily negative, they're just data. And making them not bad, but information is really what it's all about. And thank you, Michelle, for pointing that out. And then Vinny, I love how you said that yellow and red are opportunities to improve, and problems are gold. We love to solve problems, and that's really how we're going to improve. Any other thoughts on that?
So if I may, I mean, I may be paraphrasing, not saying the quote exactly, but is it Ono who said that the biggest problem is no problem, right? So it's again, changing people's paradigms in view of it. But all the things that folks from Tennessee said, and my colleague Alan said about the setting up the responsibilities and roles of leaders, that's all. I think we all agree with that, but it can still be difficult, right? This mindset and this change, this transparency, and people being comfortable with it. So it's not denying there are a lot of leaders who still blanch at showing the red, right? So that's work for all of us, right? And it's hard work.
Right. Well, thank you all for your presentations and for participating today. We are going to wrap up with just a few slides, additional information. Again, if you have any questions or would like to follow up with any of our presenters, their emails are there. Thank you so much. This is an opportunity for cross-selling. There is a group, the Public Sector Change Practitioners Meeting, again, a QR code, so you can practice with your phone, snap a picture and go to the site to learn more about these change practitioners. And they meet this coming August 23rd, so in about a month, and would love to have you participate in that. Our next forum is in September, this coming September. And if you would like to be a future presenter or would like to nominate someone to present, or if you would love to host, you are just more than willing to go ahead and give us your name. And the producers here are fantastic, and they'll get you prepared to where we can have another fantastic session. But please scan the QR code, list as a host or a presenter. We would love, love, love to hear from you. We have one last quote that we wanted to share. And I had never seen this before, but I really like it. And the fact that it's not about going faster. It's not about the shifting of the gears. Are we hitting the next target condition that we want to get to? Are we making those milestones? Because we may be shifting gears and going really fast and spinning our wheels. And this is the way I'm seeing it. But really, are we going towards that next target condition? So something to think about. And then I just want to thank you all for your participation today. We, again, kudos to our presenters. We really appreciate the Tennessee Department of Human Resources and the Arizona Government Transformation Office for taking time with us today to share with us a little bit more. I know that I've got some notes here that I'll be talking over with some of my staff, and we may be reaching out to understand better how you have been so successful. So thank you, everyone, and have a fantastic day.